So what if I told you that thousands of Irish women and young girls were being shipped to colonies across the world because they needed women? True story. And you want to know something that's even darker? This was done under the guise of a scheme. It was done under the guise of helping. But, as I said, it was much darker than that. This happened under the British Empire and their ruling whenever the Great Famine hit Ireland. And let me just get this straight. Every Irish person knows it wasn't a famine. It was forced oppression. It was war. It was people being torn from their homes, from their families. It was people dying of diseases, dying of starvation, being forced out of their homes, their land being taken from them because of the British Empire. Through systems of transportation, forced emigration, forced labour and convict labour, these schemes were put out as a means to help people, but it was far darker than that. Now, what I want you to understand is those who win the wars write his story, history, okay? And that's why so many are taught in the mainstream that this was the Great Famine. His story, history, teaches us that this was the Great Famine in Ireland known as Gorta, the Great Hunger. Yes, there was a potato blight, but Ireland was still producing plenty of food to feed everybody there. But what actually happened was the food that was being produced was being shipped out of Ireland over to England. Food was still being produced in Ireland, but the Irish weren't getting it. Their food was being exported by the British Empire. So the people of Ireland were being starved. They were living riddled with disease. They were being chased out of their homes. Their homes were being burnt. Their land was being taken from them, land that they'd loved and cherished and that had been passed through generation to generation over the years. The British Empire, all while doing this, they kept their empire, their profits, their landlords. They kept all of that protected though. And this is where we get to the really horrible part. The part where so many thousands of Irish women and young girls were being transported under the guise of the Earl Grey Famine Orphan Scheme. See how they worded that? Scheme. It wasn't a scheme. These women and young girls were being given a new opportunity, is what they thought, when really they were being sent to colonies like North America, the Caribbean and Australia, where they needed women. So I just want you to think about that. What would happen to a young girl who's being transported to a different part of the world on her own, lonely, young, not wise to the world, surrounded by men who needed women for families, for labour, for breeding? So between 1848 and 1850, there were over 4,000 documented, now I want you to keep that in your mind, documented women and young girls that were being sent to these colonies that needed women. Now, the reason I say documented is because, as I said before, those who win the wars write his story, the history. So that's only the documented women and young girls that we know about. Keep that in mind. Now, these girls had been through so much already. They'd been oppressed, starved, taken out of their homes, put into workhouses, and then given this great opportunity of a new life. And of course, a lot of them took it, not realising what was ahead. In these colonies, they needed workers, they needed mothers, they needed wives, they needed labour. A lot of these women were so inexperienced in the world, they wouldn't have known what to do, they wouldn't have known what was ahead. A lot of these girls didn't realise that they were being sent because these colonies needed population growth. A lot of these colonies needed women, they needed children. How sad is that? Now, a lot of these Irish women that were being transported under this great scheme, they ended up in factories, they ended up in labour houses, they even ended up as servants, they ended up in marriage bureaus. And whenever I say marriage bureau, it's not this airy-fairy matchmaking fairy tale that it's described as through marriage bureaus. They were being selected. They were like cattle. They were being selected for whatever they were needed for. So people might say they weren't necessarily being sent to breed, but let's be honest about it, okay? Whenever these young, vulnerable, Irish, defenceless women and young girls were being sent to colonies of mostly men, what do you think was going to happen? These colonies were full of men desperate for wives, mothers and servants. And these young Irish vulnerable women, this was their only choice. This was the choice they were given under this great scheme. Colonial reproductive exploitation. Their bodies were used, their labour was used, their womanhood was used. And this is why I have such an issue with governments worldwide, because they make these choices and they force them on the people, and the people have to abide. Even the ones who came over to Ireland and who were part of the destruction and the oppression, they were doing their jobs. It's crazy, and we see so much of this in today's world as well. We do. Governments don't care about us. And at that time, the British Empire, they exploited the Irish women. They used the Irish women. These Irish women became wives, mothers, labourers, servants, breeders under the British rule. How crazy is that? So this is something that really isn't spoke about enough. And I just want you to think about that. Vulnerable, scared, hungry, desperate young Irish women thought they were being given a great opportunity under this scheme. How crazy is that?